Hi everyone. In this video, we will discuss all the TypeC questions from the chapter Tuples of class 11, chapter 8. Now write a Python program that creates a tuple storing first 9 terms of Fibonacci series. So we have already done this program in list. Now we'll do the same program by using tuple. So first of all, we'll create a tuple which will store the first 3 items of this Fibonacci series, that is 0, 1, 1. As you know, in a Fibonacci series, each number is the sum of its previous 2 numbers. And it begins with, if you begin with 0 and 1, these are the first 2 terms. Then the third term is 1 itself, which is sum of 1 and 0. And the next fourth term is 1 plus 1, that is 2. Like this, your Fibonacci series continues. Now it has to continue till 9 terms. So all these terms will be stored in a tuple. So we will initialize a tuple with first 3 values of the series, that is 0, 1, 1. Okay, now we will enter how many terms you want to display. And here it is given 9 terms. So you can either take the value of n as 9, or you can give any other value for n also, so that many terms will be displayed. Now for I in range n minus 3, because already 3 terms are there in this tuple, so we have to print the rest of the terms. So I will iterate through n minus 3, that means 0 to n minus 3. Now tuple is equal to tuple plus, there is one more tuple which is appended or added with this tuple, that is tuple of I plus 1 plus tuple of I plus 2. That means the values which is at index number I plus 1 and index number I plus 2, those will be added. So in a first iteration, what it will be, when I value is 0, then tuple of I plus 1, that is 0 plus 1, is 1. So value which is at index number 1. And next I plus 2, that is value which is index number 2. So those two will be added. That means here 1 plus 1 will be added. That will become 2. So your tuple becomes 2, then comma you have to give, because there's a single element, and if you don't give a comma, then it will not be considered as a tuple. Okay, so the next element, that is 2, that will be added with your existing tuple. So now your tuple becomes 0, 1, 1, 2 in the first iteration. Similarly, in the next iteration, the next value, that is 3, that will be appended with your tuple. So like this, suppose if you want to print up to 9 terms, then 9 terms will be printed like this. Now next question is to write a program that receives the index number and returns the corresponding value in the tuple. So this is a very simple program. First of all, you have to enter a tuple that has to be stored in, let's say, variable tup. And the next thing that you have to accept from the user, that is I, which is the index number. Then you just have to write this tuple within square bracket I. That means it will print the corresponding value which is at index number I. So while running the program, it will ask you to enter a tuple. But here we have used eval function to enter a tuple. You can see here. So while entering the value, you have to keep the values within brackets, parentheses. Then only it will be considered as a tuple. Then the index value, you can put any value. Here I have put 5. So it is printing the value which is at index number 5 is 9. Now write a program that receives a Fibonacci term and returns a number telling which term it is. So the same thing you have to do. You have to create a Fibonacci series and store it in a variable, in a tuple variable, let's say tup. And just the same thing you have to do that you have done in a first program. Once your Fibonacci series is ready and stored in a tuple variable, then next thing is that you have to ask the user to enter the term. Okay, so let's say that is stored in a variable f. Now we have to use the index function to find out the index number of that particular value. So tup.index function, within that you have to pass the value. Then it will display you the index number of that value. So once your Fibonacci series is ready, here it is with 11 terms, and you have entered the Fibonacci term 21. Then it will display that the term is at index number 8. Now write a program to input n numbers from the user, store these numbers in a tuple, print the maximum and minimum from this tuple. Okay, so We will enter a tuple at runtime. So we have used eval function and stored in a variable, let's say tup. Then it has to print the tuple is tup. Then you just have to use max and min function to find out the maximum and minimum number which is present in the tuple. Let's say the entered tuple is like say 12, 8, 4. Like this, you can put some numbers and just remember while entering the tuple, you have to put it within parentheses. Now it will display the tuple. Now the maximum value it is showing us 20 and the minimum value is 3. This is a simple program. Now write a program to create a nested tuple to store roll number, name and marks of students. Okay, so here I have kept some roll number, name and marks of some 4 students. So that means it is like one tuple, tuples within one tuple. So this is a nested tuple form. So I have created one nested tuple variable, let's say n underscore tup. Within that, these are the individual tuples. The first tuple is storing the record of the student having roll number 1, name is Amit and mark is 90. So that has to be kept within a parenthesis. Like this, you can put any number of tuple records and you have to put it in the main tuple. That means you can see the outer parenthesis also there and all these tuples are there within this. Now it will print like this. Suppose if you want to print the each nested tuple values, that means the details of each student, then you can just have to use a for loop. For I in tup, just print I. That means it will print each of the nested tuples. So the first tuple is 1 Amit 90. This is the first record, and the second tuple is like this. All the tuples will be printed like this. That means your main tuple, that is n underscore tup, is having 4 items or 4 values, and each item is again is a tuple type of variable or tuple type of value it is storing, and it is displaying like this. Now write a program that interactively creates a nested tuple to store marks of 3 subjects for 5 students. That means you have to take the marks in the form of tuple. Okay, like this for 5 students. Each student is having mark for 3 subjects. Okay, so let's create a tuple variable. Okay, tup, which is initially blank, no value is there within this. And we have to store the marks of 5 students. That means there will be 5 elements in this tuple, and each element is again a tuple which is storing the marks of 3 subjects. Okay, so for I in range 5, marks is another tuple variable which will store the marks for 3 subjects, and this will be entered by the user. And here we have used eval function. That means all 3 subject marks you have to enter within parentheses. So that is considered as a single tuple. That will be added with your main tuple, that is tup. So tup is equal to tup plus marks. Here you have to give a comma, otherwise it will not be considered as a tuple variable. Why? Because it's having a single value. Here marks is a single value. Okay. Now after this, at the end of this loop, you will get the value marks for all the 5 students. So while running the program, it will ask you to enter the marks for 3 subjects for the first student. Okay, so here suppose you have entered some values. Remember to enter the values within parentheses. Next again, it will ask you to enter the marks for 3 subjects. Like this, it will go on asking for 5 times because your loop is ranging from 0 to 4. So after that, it is showing you the marks of the 5 students in 3 subjects are like this. That means all these tuples are stored in your main tuple tup. So this is how the output. Now in the program created in previous question, add a function that computes total mark and average marks obtained by each student. Okay, now let's do the same thing that we have done in the previous program. We have to accept the marks of 5 students in 3 subjects, and let's store it in a variable, let's say tup. Okay, now you have to print the marks of 5 students in 3 subjects at tup. Let's say the entered values are like this. You can see the bottom of the page. Okay, now we have to find out the average mark of each student in all these 3 subjects. So we have to take a for loop which will iterate through each of the items of this tuple. There are 5 items in the tuple and each item is again another tuple. Okay, so for student in TUP, okay, student is a variable which will iterate through all the values of this tuple. Okay, now marks is equal to sum of student. So here we have used a built-in function called sum. Within that we have passed the value as student. Here student is nothing but again another tuple which is the inner tuple. So if you use the sum function and within that you will pass a tuple value, then it will add all the values which are present in this tuple. Okay, so in this loop, marks will store the sum of the marks of the first tuple. Okay, that is 89 plus 90 plus 95. That is stored in a variable marks. Now average is equal to AVG, that is equal to marks divided by 3. Okay, now we'll just print the total mark is marks. That means for the first student, the total mark is marks, that is the sum of the marks of this in 3 subjects. Now average is AVG. Here we used a round function to store the rounded value. That means we'll round up to 2 digits after the decimal point. Okay, like this your loop will continue 5 times because there are 5 values in this tuple. Like this you'll get the average mark of all the 5 students. Now let's run the program and see the output. Now once you run the program, it will ask you to enter the marks for 3 subjects. For student, let's say the marks are like this 89, 90, 95. Like this it will ask for 5 students marks. And after you enter the marks, then you can just print. The output is like this. The marks of 5 students in 3 subjects are like this. Now the total mark is in a first case for the first student. Total mark is 274 and average is 91.33. In the second case, for the second student, total mark is 271 and average is 90.33. Like this, it will go on displaying. Write a program that inputs 2 tuples and creates a third that contains all elements of the first followed by all elements of the second. So this is a very simple program. You have to just take 2 tuple variables tup1 and tup2 and you can enter the values for these tuples. At runtime, you can enter by using eval function. Then the third tuple is, let's say, tup3, which is nothing but tup1 plus tup2. So once you run the program, it will ask you to enter for the values of first tuple. Let's say it is 1, 2, 3, 4 I have entered, and you have to enter within parentheses. The second tuple is also entered, and you can see the third tuple is like this, which is storing the values of first tuple, then the values of second tuple. Write a program to return the shortest string in the tuple of strings str underscore tuple. Precondition is tuple should contain at least one element. So we'll take a tuple variable str underscore tuple, which will store the strings as a tuple value, and you can just take it by using eval function at runtime. Now I can see once you run the program, it will ask you to enter the tuple. Then let's say we have entered the tuple value like this. You have to keep within parentheses. You can take some strings separated by comma. Strings means you have to keep the text within double quotes. Like this, you have to pass the tuple value. Now, the condition is if length of the tuple is greater than or equal to 1, then only it will continue. Otherwise, it will print that the tuple should have at least one element. That means if the tuple is having one or more than one element, then it will proceed to find out the shortest string. Now, I'll take a variable shortest which will store the first string of the tuple, that is str underscore tuple within square bracket 0. The string which is present at index number 0 will be stored in a variable shortest. Now it will check for all the strings present in this tuple. So for s in str underscore tuple, if length of s is less than length of the shortest, then shortest is equal to s. If any string in the tuple is having length which is shorter than the length of the string shortest, which is storing the first string of the tuple, then shortest will be assigned with that particular string. So at the end of this loop, you will find the shortest string will be stored in a variable shortest. Then you can see the output is like this. Be simple and sincere. Then the shortest string is B. Now create the following tuple using for loop. First tuple containing square of integers starting from 1 to 50. The next tuple will store the alphabets like this: A 1 time, B 2 times, C 3 times, like this. Z will be 26 times. So the same program we have already done in list. Here the same thing, but instead of list you have to use tuple. So we have initialized a tuple, let's say sq underscore tuple, to store the square of the numbers, which is blank initially. Now for loop will iterate from 1 to 51, so that I will have values 1, 2, 3 till 50. And square tuple is equal to square tuple plus I to the power 2. With this tuple, at each iteration, the next values will be added. I to the power 2 means first value of this tuple is 1 to the power 2, that is 1 square, that is 1. So since there is a single value in this tuple, you have to use a comma over there. The first value in this tuple is 1, second is 2 to the power 2, that is 4, next 3 to the power 2, that is 9. Like this, it will continue to store till 50 square. Now the next tuple to store the alphabets, let's say the variable is alpha underscore tuple, which is initially blank. Now we'll fill it with using for loop for I in range 1 to 27. And as you know, the character equivalent of lowercase a is 97. Okay, so you just have to append that value I plus 96. Initial value of I is 1. So 1 plus 96 will give you the value as 97. 97 is converted into character by using chr function. And that has to be printed how many times? I times. First initial value of I is 1. So A will be printed 1 time. Next iteration I value will be 2. So 96 plus 2 will become 98. That is B. B will be printed 2 times. So like this, and that you have to keep within a tuple. You can see, which will be appended to your alpha tuple. Now you can print your alpha tuple. Then you can see the output. So once you run the program, you can see the square of numbers from 1 to 50 are like this, and the alphabet tuple is like this. A is printed 1 time, B 2 times, C 3 times, like this. Now given a tuple pairs is equal to 2, 5, 4, 2, 9, 8 and 12, 10, like this. Count the number of pairs A, B such that both A and B are even. So you can see your tuple is looking like this. If you just represent it in a two-dimensional matrix form, then you can see 2, 5 is present like this. 2 is present at the index number 0, 0, 0 row, 0 column. 5 is at 0 row and column number 1. Okay, like this. So you can see there are 4 rows, and the row numbers are 0, 1, 2, 3. And column numbers are 0 and 1. So see, the program is like this. The tuple is here, pairs, and it's having this value, nested tuple. And C is a variable which is initialized with 0. Here we will store the count of pairs, which where all two values are even. Now for I in range length of pairs, I will iterate through the length of the tuple. Here length of the tuple is 4, because 4 values are there in this tuple. So I will arrange from 0, 1, 2 and 3. If pairs I and 0, you can see it's kept within square brackets, that is showing the index number. Okay, like index number of 2 is 0, 0. Index number of 5 is 0, 1. Okay, index number of 4 is 1, 0. Index number of 2 is 1, 1, like this. Okay, so if pairs I 0 percent is 2 equal to 0, that means when it is divided by 2, it is giving you 0. That means this is an even number. And again, pairs of I 1 is also one even number. Then your count value or C value will be increased by 1. Okay, so initially I value is 0. So pairs of 0, 0 and 0, 1. If both are even, then count value, C value will be increased by 1. The second iteration I value becomes 1. So the values at index number 1, 0 and 1, 1 both are even. Then C value will be incremented by 1. Like this your loop will continue. Then at the end of your loop you will get the number of pairs. So here the output is 2 because there are 2 pairs where both the numbers are even. Now write a program that input two tuples sequence underscore A and sequence underscore B and print true if every element of sequence underscore A is also an element of sequence underscore B, else print false. So here we'll take two tuples sequence A and sequence B and we will check for I in sequence A. If I not in sequence B, then it has to just print false and break the loop over there. Else you can continue. That means if I in sequence B, that means if that value is present in the second sequence, then it will continue to check the next value. Then at the end of the loop, at the end of the for loop, it will print true. Else true. That means once the for loop will complete its execution, that means all the values of sequence A are present in sequence B, then it will print true. Okay, once you run the program, let's say the first tuple is 1, 2, 3 having values 1, 2, 3. The second tuple is having values 2, 3, 1, 4, 7. Then it is printing true. Why? Because in the first iteration you can see for I in sequence A. So I value is 1. So it will check whether I is present in sequence B or not. And it will find that I1 is present in sequence B. So it will continue. We'll go to the else part, we'll continue. Check for the next value, that is 2. So 2 is again present in sequence B, so it will again continue. We check for 3. 3 is also present in sequence B. Again it will come out of the for loop. Then after that we'll print true. This else is the last else is with respect to the for loop. Okay. Now second run, let's say the first tuple entered is 1, 2, 3 and the second tuple entered is 2, 5, 4, 8. Okay. So once you like the iteration will go like this. First value of I is 1. So 1 is not present in the second list. Okay. So if I not in sequence B, then it has to print false and will come out of the loop there itself. It will not check further for the next elements. So like this we'll get the output. Now compute the mean of values stored in a tuple. Mean is sum of the values divided by the number of elements. Calculate the mean of a tuple with numeric values. So first of all, take a tuple, store it in a variable, let's say tup, and n is a variable which will store the length of the tuple, that means the number of elements present in the tuple. And s is a variable to store the sum of the values which is initialized with 0. So here we have used a for loop for I in tup s plus equal to I. So each value will be checked in the tuple and that will be added with the sum. So at the end of this loop, you'll get the sum of the values present in the tuple. Instead of this loop, you can just use sum function also. S is equal to sum. Within that, you can pass the tuple variable. That way also, you will get the sum of the values. So once you get the sum and number of elements, you just divide sum with n to get the mean. Okay, so m is equal to s divided by n. And here I have used a round function where m is rounded up to 2 digits to avoid any longer decimal values. So first the tuple entered is, here you can see 3, 8, 1, 5, 6, 4, 9 like this. Then the number of elements, it is showing 7. The sum of the values is 36. You can see the mean over here is 36 by 7, which is coming as 5.14. Now write a program to check the mode of a tuple. It is actually an element with maximum occurrences. So first of all, you have to take a tuple variable, store a variable, let's say tup, and max count is a variable which is initialized with 0. It will store the maximum count. Now for I in tuple, we will check all the values which are present in the tuple, and I'll store how many times that value is present by using count function. So tup.count, within that you have to pass I, then it will store how many times I is present, stored in a variable C. If C is greater than maximum count, then maximum count is equal to C. Then mode is that particular item of the tuple. So if you run the program, let's say the entire tuple is like this, 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, 3, 5, 3, like this. So it will give you the output as mode is 3, because 3 is the value which is present maximum times in this tuple. Write a program to calculate the average of a tuple element by calculating its sum and dividing it with the count of the elements. Then compare it with the mean obtained using mean function of the statistics module. Okay, so first of all, we'll find out the mean of this tuple that we have already done. That means you have to take the sum of the numbers of this tuple and divide it with the number of elements in the tuple. Then you have to use the mean function which is available in the statistics module. There is a module called statistics that you have to import. So now you are not very much familiar about this module and how to import all these things, but since it is asked in this question, you just know this. There is a module called statistics which is providing some built-in functions like mean and all. So to use that function, you have to import that particular module by using import statement. That has to be the first statement of the program. Then you have to use the function mean by using this module name. So statistics dot mean. Within that you have to put the tuple variable tup. So it will find out the mean directly. It will calculate the mean. You don't have to calculate it manually, and that is stored in a variable m2. And m1 is already storing your mean which you have calculated by using the sum function, sum of tuple. That means s is storing the sum of the elements of the tuple and n is storing the length. So sum divided by length, that is giving you the mean value m1. I'll just display both these values, m1 and m2. You can see both are giving you the same value, 5. Now mean of means you have to find out. Given a nested tuple tup1 having these values, write a program that display the mean of individual element of the tuple tup1 and then display the mean of these computed means. Okay, so actually there are 3 elements in this tuple tup1 and each element is again of type tuple having some values, having some 2 or 3 values. Okay, so tup1 is like this. Now there's a variable, let's say mean sum, which is initialized with 0, and the length of the tuple is stored in a variable tup underscore len. Okay, which will store the value as length of the tuple, which is nothing but 3 over here. Now we'll check each of the elements of this tuple. So for item in tup1, so item will have first value 1, 2, second value 3, 4.15, 5.15, like this. So S is equal to sum of item. Okay, so the values, the sum of the values of the inner tuple will be stored in a variable S, and C will store the length of that particular item. That means the length of the nested tuple, and M is equal to S divided by C. So if you divide S with C, then you'll get the mean of the nested tuple. Then you can just print it. Mean of the nested tuple is M. That you can use a round function also, so that it will be rounded up to few digits. Here I have given 2 digits. Now that mean value will be added with your mean sum, which is initialized with 0. So mean sum plus equal to M. Okay. So at the end of this loop, your mean sum will store the sum of the means. Okay. Now that mean sum will be divided by tuple length to get you to give you the mean of the tuple, main tuple. So mean of the main tuple is tup underscore mean. So once you run the program, it is displaying you the mean of the nested tuple. First nested tuple is 1.5. Mean of the second nested tuple is 4.1. Mean of the third nested tuple is 10.5. And mean of the main tuple, that is 1.5 plus 4.1 plus 10.5 divided by 3. That is giving you 5.37. Now you have to find out standard deviation. Standard deviation can be done in few ways, but here you have to use this formula. which will compute the deviation as the square of the difference between each element and the mean you can see over here, and which will be divided by n minus 1, and you have to take the square root of this. Now let's do this program. So you have to first of all find out the mean of this tuple. So here the tuple is having values, let's say 2, 7, 9, 14, 6, 5, 13, like this. You can take any sample values, and n is equal to length of the tuple and s is equal to sum of the tuple. Okay, so mean is equal to s divided by n. So you got the mean. Now we have to find out the difference between this each number of this tuple and mean. Okay, so we have to take a for loop for item in sample x is equal to item minus mean to the power 2. Okay, now square sum plus is equal to s. Square sum is initialized with 0 and it will be added with x each time. So at the end of this loop, you will get the square of the sum of the difference between the each element and the mean. Okay. Now after that, you have to take the square root of that square sum divided by n minus 1. So square sum divided by n minus 1, and you have to use this function called sqrt, which is present in math module. So for that you have to import the module math. Import math, that has to be written as the first statement of this program. Then you can use the function sqrt, math.sqrt. Within that you have to pass this value square sum divided by n minus 1. So you will get the standard deviation value. So once you run the program, it is showing you the mean is 8.0 and standard deviation is coming as 4.32. Now here ends the solutions of chapter 8 tuples, all the type C questions class of this chapter tuples we have discussed over here. If there is any doubt, you can put it in comment section, and just stay tuned for more solutions and do subscribe. Thank you.